I tell nurses all the time, because they'll tell me, I don't like research, but we all do research every single day. You try something, it doesn't work. You go ask 5 people what they do, you go look it up, you implement it, you evaluate if that worked, then you go disseminate that information by telling all your colleagues what worked. That is research. Our physician colleagues, they understand the value of having their name in publication. Despite the rigor of their medical school, they're still in leadership, they're still writing, they're attending conferences. But in nursing, we don't have that. And so we haven't been incentivized to participate, and we haven't been given the opportunity a lot of times to pick something we're passionate about. But I think once you identify that, you're going to see the benefits of research. If we're the largest segment of the healthcare workforce, but people can't find us, that's our fault. If people don't know what we do, that's our fault. And so if we do the writing and tell our own stories, if we do the writing and participate in that research, if we do the writing and report on the results, if we do the writing and report on the strategies, we can own that because we just did it. So now when someone's looking for an expert and they go look up credible evidence, they're going to see nurses all over that. What do nurses do? We bring that art, science, and humanity to our interactions with people. Whatever their problem, whatever their situation, we find ways, strategies to implement that are in alignment with them as a person, their values, and their beliefs, and we support them in whatever decision that they choose to make.
Welcome to the Nurse on Purpose podcast, where we challenge media stereotypes about nursing and spotlight the incredible and diverse roles nurses play in healthcare. I'm your host, Nello. Every week, I'll be joined by a nurse who is reshaping the narrative. From frontline care to leadership, education, innovation, and beyond. Our aim is to show the world that nursing is so much more than what we see on TV. Together, we'll explore how we can collaborate with media and other stakeholders to create authentic and inspiring portrayals of nurses. Let's begin the conversation and ignite change, one episode at a time. Hello, everyone, and welcome again to the Nurse on Purpose podcast, where we challenge media stereotypes about nursing and highlight the incredible work that nurses do every day. I'm joined today by an incredible nurse whose over decade-long career has spanned from education to dermatology to research. Dr. Kimberly Madison is a doctorally prepared nurse practitioner and the founder of Mahogany Dermatology, that promotes nursing, education, and research. She's building an organization dedicated to addressing gaps in dermatology education and research for nurses and nurse practitioners. Dr. Madison is also the founder and co-host of TMI, I love that name, the Melanin Initiative. It's a podcast focused on health literacy, elevating the expertise of nurses, and increasing awareness about professional opportunities in the healthcare industry. Dr. Madison, you're welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity to come on here and chat with you today.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. So today I really want to learn about your journey because, I haven't actually exhausted the list of all the hats that you wear. I mean, you are everything. You sit on advisory boards, committees, you're involved in professional organizations, you founded networking groups, nurse internship program, and you support nurses and Ps who are building their own dermatology business. Girl, you are doing it all. So let's just begin by really talking about your nursing journey and the roles that led you to where you are today, transition into that dermatology focus.
Well, yes, as we're at the time that we're filming this, it is my nurse anniversary month. I started a long time ago at Georgetown University in DC in the residency program. And since that time, traveled quite a bit. I was a travel nurse, actually. And then I went back and did the BSN to DNP program at George Washington University. And that ended in 22, I think. Now, after that ended, that program was 6 years. So I was 6 years older. The world was 6 years older. The pandemic had happened. My relationship was 6 years older. So I said, instead of jumping like we do if you're very ambitious, you cross one finish line and you run to the next starting line, right? And I said, I'm just going to pause and start with a blank slate, figure out who I am again, reconnect with my family who's been so patient. And, I have all this information. What do I do with this? And so I said, what would I do if I could do anything for free? And the answer was right. And I needed something to write about. And so I said, well, I kind of fallen in love with dermatology during the pandemic because my love bug had some acne. And so I went to the YouTube University to come up with a skincare regimen. Honestly, if that never happened, I probably would still be doing the same thing to this day. I have to be honest. But I went down that rabbit hole. I never came back. The doctors I was listening to really started getting into the science of it, and they really piqued my interest. So then I started thinking about it not as a consumer, but as a clinician. And as maybe some of your audience may or might not know, in nursing, we really don't get that much exposure to dermatology. And actually, because of all the research I've done, actually, if doctors don't practice in derm, they don't get it either. So we're all out there on the fence, but it's 85% of the cases that walk through a primary care, urgent care door. So everybody's treating the skin because skin is everywhere. So derm, there's like 3,000 to 4,000 diagnoses. That's a lot of information and a large learning curve. And I've
Yeah.
learned that the best place for me to retain information is to put myself in a teaching spot. So I came up with this blog, Mahogany Dermatology. And really it was originally it was a placeholder because one day I wanted to have a clinic. And so I start this blog, and that's the idea was like, I'll read about acne, I'll write about acne. I'll read about psoriasis, I'll write. Like, it was really basic. And I just thought maybe someone else might want this. So I had to go find this education and training. Like everyone else, I went to Google and quickly learned that all dermatology resources are actually not MPPA friendly. So you really have to read very closely. I came across a wonderful organization started by Risha and Andrea called Diversity in Dermatology. And I saw they had a blog. And I went to see who they're talking to. And it hadn't been updated since the pandemic. You know, we all had our pandemic projects.
Yeah.
And so I just reached out to them and said, hey, do you need an author for your blog? And they did. So they brought me on as the blog chair. I participated in their Achieve program, which is an online program for derm and Ps and PAs in the first 3 years of derm to build a medical derm foundation. Started going to the conference, networking, continued my reading in derm. Just got super immersed in it, and my life has never been the same. So originally, I'm just like everyone else. We go to patient care school. Maybe it's nursing school, maybe it's PA or MD, but at the end of the day, it's patient care school. It's just one
Yeah.
segment of what we can actually do with our expertise. And so by working with them, I started being more exposed to the business side of derm. And that changed everything. And that's partly why now you heard you talk about Mahogany Dermatology, nursing education, and research. And so through my own entrepreneurial journey, I realized two things are super important in business. One, people. When someone tells you about your idea to start a business, what's the first thing they're going to do? Tell you how wonderful the idea is, how it's going to change you and your family's life, all the things about the business. But if you are consistent and persistent, your business will grow. And when your business grows, you're going to need help. And when it comes time to needing help, you're going to need a strategy because now those people are going to be taking over your vision. So that actually ends up becoming your primary job is selling the vision because they're just worker bees, right? We're worker bees for someone else's dream. So you have to take the seat of selling the vision because no one else can do that. Other people can send emails, they can file papers, but the vision, as the person with the vision, you have to sell that. And so as people stay in business longer and longer, they focus so much on investing in people. You don't even hear them talk about the business anymore. They talk about the people. The second most important thing is community. I have to identify what business benefits from my business being in existence because we can keep each other in business. And so so right now, actually today that we're filming, I'm starting an 8-week business coaching program. And through this program, I'm going to build the community that I'm now a part of. Because look, if you're a business person, if you're an entrepreneur, two things are true. Time and capital are limited, but we're telling you to go do all these things and you need to go do this and do that. And you hear us, but I just said your time and capital are limited. So instead of telling you what you need to do, why don't we just create a community that meets you right where you are? So let's
Yeah.
just say we have a community of 100 NPs and all of us come in from patient care school. So we all come in with the idea of starting a clinic that treats patients. We are interested in what we're exposed to. So it makes total sense. But let's say you spend a little bit of time in this community and find out that everyone's struggling with social media. So yeah, originally you had the idea of starting a derm clinic, but now you realize, well, actually, maybe I should start a social media firm because you already have 100 clients. So it makes perfect sense. And they're going to use you, you're going to use them, you keep each other in business. And we can go around the
Yeah.
table on all the skills and things that business owners need. But if we create the community, we can get everything we want out of there. And at the heart of that for me is credibility and visibility. And I think that lies in publishing, which I'm excited to tie that into our topic today.
Awesome. Wonderful. Okay, so one of the pillars of your company is addressing gaps in dermatology research for nurses. How did you really become interested in nursing research? And why do you think that it's so important that nurses are actively involved in healthcare research?
Well, my first degree is actually in biology, so my love and passion for science goes a long, long way back. And yeah, I never fell out of love with that. And so I just love information and have had to write so many papers. And I'm very inquisitive. Anyone knows me knows I ask a lot of questions. And when you're trying to give answers, you want to give credible answers. And in the line of science and medicine, credible answers come from the research. And I tell nurses all the time because they'll tell me I don't like research. But we all do research every single day, right? You try something, it doesn't work. You go ask five
Yeah.
people what they do, you go look it up, you implement it, you evaluate
Yeah.
if that worked, then you go disseminate that information by telling all your colleagues what worked. That is research. Unfortunately, I think
Yeah.
in nursing, because it's given as like busy work, seen as
Yeah.
like a waste of time, and then someone's telling you the topic, which may or may not
Yeah.
align with your passion. Whereas our physician colleagues, they understand the value of having their name in publication. Despite the rigor of their medical school, they're still in leadership, they're still writing, they're attending conferences, and they know because it makes them more competitive for their next phase in their journey. But in nursing, we don't have that. And so we haven't been incentivized to participate. And we haven't been given the opportunity a lot of times to pick something we're passionate about. But I think if
Yeah.
once you identify that, you're going to see the benefits of research.
That's wonderful that you said that. I was reading an article by Anne Scanlon McGinnity. I mean, she wrote this article in 2021, just coming off the heels of COVID, and it was titled Revision in the Image of Nursing. And she said that the key to changing the image of nursing is to first envision the future state of nursing. And in that, she kind of called to action nursing organizations to say that they really will be the ones who are pivotal in kind of informing the direction that our profession goes, even though that there are individual efforts being made. One thing that she said that really struck me was she mentioned that when a student is seeking candidacy in a nursing school, right? And let me just read it the way she had written it. She says, a candidate seeking nursing as a profession must bring the personal values of caring, compassion, and integrity. And then it's our professional responsibility as educators and organizational leaders to hone that individual's professional identity as a clinician, scientist, epidemiologist, etc. Meaning we need to start from the bottom to really start to prepare our students to think of themselves in this way. Because like you said, nurses don't really think about themselves as researchers or scientists, as epidemiologists. We need to come away from that task-oriented nursing mindset. How do you think nurses can prepare students to really start thinking of themselves in this way, being professionally minded? Like you said, our physician colleagues are going to conferences. They are, leaders in their field, they're experts. How do we prepare students to also have this mindset?
Well, I do want to be fair because I've been thinking about this question for over a year now. And I think one of the things that separates nursing and physicians, particularly students, is for the most part, doctors going through med school are not working. On the other hand, a lot of nurses work through nursing school. And in nursing, we do two things. We're trying to address the increased patient demand, right? So
Yeah,
it's like, well,
yeah,
who can we get there to treat that patient? Well, let's get some
yeah,
nurses in there. Well, these nurses are already working, they already have families. Let's try to make this as accessible as possible. That's why we have
yeah,
multiple entry points. We have day school, night school, weekend school, in the classroom, online, because nursing's trying to address that primary problem. And that has brought other conversations and controversies and confusion,
yes,
right? But I
yes,
think,
yes.
in fairness of nursing, I think that's at the heart of what we were trying to do, is to help meet the patient's need. And so what
Yeah,
can we do? Well, I've worked on a curriculum committee before, and you can come up with an idea today, and it can take 3 to 4 years before it's implemented, because you can't change the students. If they just came into that program a year or two ago and you change everything, it disrupts their whole graduation. So you do have to be
yeah,
mindful of that. Now, on the other hand, look, I'm an entrepreneur, right? I'm talking to you. I
yeah,
don't think we need to keep telling the schools all the things they need to do to get better, because that's another business. Why would I go out here and tell McDonald's how to make better burgers? I want to
Yeah.
have the best burger in town. So instead of telling that school that still has the same professor, the same book, the same lecture, but each year that tuition goes up by 10,000 and another 10,000, instead of telling them how to get better, why don't we just create that table that we're looking for? Instead of begging for attention and to have our voice heard, we just create the table and create a place for us to be heard and seen. That's my perspective on it. And I think through active mentorship, which is what we're doing at the Mahogany Telederm Nurse Intern, is you give them a task. So our physicians, right, by the time they start practicing a decade later, they've written so many publications or had their name on it in a team effort. It's a team. Okay. So
The names are on it.
instead of me struggling trying to get one paper out, why don't we collectively write this paper, and collectively we can get out more papers together? So when you get mentorships, because we all get emails, we all get DMs from people, aspiring clinicians and students, instead of just meeting on video or a cold cup of coffee, why don't you say, let's do this thing together? Because it's through the doing that you're going to do the most learning.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
And then you do your research. So if you are trying to open a business, you've just done the research. Now you can really speak to something while you're addressing this need. And when people
Yeah.
question you, you're going to have credible information to back up what you're saying. And it's going to address that imposter syndrome that we all struggle with, because now
Yes,
you
we
know what
do.
you're talking about.
Yeah. You make research sound so interesting, and you make like ideation and activation of your ideas really sound doable, right? And achievable, which is what
I'm
I
glad.
enjoy the most about you, is that you're like, well, let's just go ahead and do it. And everyone is sitting there in fear. And we do need to get rid of that fear, because I think there's a lot of fearfulness when it comes to nursing and putting ourselves out there as experts. So, speaking of research and George Washington University, I
Oh,
want to
yes,
talk
I
to
saw that.
I want to talk to you because that is your alma mater. I was like, oh, okay. We want to talk to you about the Woodhull study, which I know by this point you're familiar with. So, just tying it back to that media representation of nurses, you know, I wanted to just kind of explore that research. And so, for my listeners who are not familiar with the Woodhull study, I'll tell you about it. And it's a study that was conducted in 1997 first. It was named after Nancy Woodhull, who was the founding editor of USA Today. She was concerned about the limited representation of women in media. And then later she was diagnosed with cancer. And while undergoing her treatment, she was being taken care of by these wonderful nurses, which started to get her thinking about why more nursing voices were not present in media, and tying it back to that gender disparity. So the study highlighted that lack of visibility for the voices and perspectives of nurses, being that they were the largest healthcare professionals at the time, 3.5 million strong, nearly 90% of whom were women. And even though that was the case, their voices were largely absent from stories where it seemed that their expertise would have been extremely relevant. And so that research showed that nurses were quoted in about 4% of any like health news report, very hardly seen in anything that had to do with policy. And so that was that 1997 research. 20 years later, that research was revisited. And so it's called the Woodhull Study Revisited. And it was conducted by faculty at the George Washington University, which is why we were laughing, School of Nursing. And it was led by Dr. Diana Mason, PhD RN, as a principal investigator, with her co-researchers Barbara Glickston, Laura Nixon, and Christy Westphal. What did they find after 20 years of the first research being conducted? Unfortunately, they found that there was not much difference from 20 years ago. In fact, this time nurses were identified in only 2% of quotes in healthcare articles, 2% in newspapers, 2% in magazines, and 1% in healthcare publications, which is really abysmal. And nurses' voices did not appear in any opinion pieces. And when we were quoted, it was only about nursing specific topics, but nothing that addressed us as experts in the larger sort of healthcare picture. That's the highlight of the study, the Woodhull study and the Woodhull Study Revisited. So I'll let you take it away and talk about your thoughts on, on this study.
Well, hats off to you because you brought it to my attention. And it's really kind of at the heart of why you're even doing this show, right? And I just thought, well,
Absolutely.
wow, what a great topic. And yeah, I thought I love the fact that they just revisited the same resources too, to see what was
Hmm.
updated, aside
Mostly,
from like
yes.
online stuff, right?
Yes, yes.
Um, and that editor who realized the impact of nurses, I think our
Mm,
society does too, right? So, like, we're the largest segment of the healthcare workforce. We're the most respected. We've been the most respected, and we're still very silent. They said this in the study, right?
mhm.
Until you encounter the system, like she did as a patient, or like someone does when they're visiting a loved one. And they even noted that even when the reporters try to get nurses as being the lead of the
Mm,
story, it's the
yeah,
editor who pushes back. So I love that they
yeah,
mentioned that because, oh, I hear, okay, so next time we just pitch the editor, right?
right.
And that apparently that editor hasn't been in the hospital system or hasn't had to visit anyone, because if they did, it wouldn't have been an argument.
Right, exactly. Wonderful. And I love that you said, the pushback a lot of times, and like we'll kind of start from the top. So they sought to answer three questions in this study, right? The phase one question addressed, have nurses been more represented in the media, print sources, more in from 1997 till today? We already answered that. The answer is no. If anything, it was worse, but they couldn't really say it was worse because they didn't know how statistically significant those percentages were. So if anything, it was just same. It was like nothing changed, right? The second question they needed to answer was, what were the barriers to journalists using nurses as healthcare experts and sources? And then these are some of the barriers that were identified. First, there was barriers keeping nurses from journalists, and then there were barriers keeping journalists from nurses. The barriers keeping journalists from nurses were that journalists didn't fully understand the range of nurses' roles, work, and education. I'm reading this as a direct quote. The second was that journalists often don't know how to find nurses to interview, and they have limited time to track them down. And then the third thing was that there were editorial biases, policies, and processes that got in the way of using nurses as sources. These editorial biases came from even the way that they addressed the source. So, for instance, if the source was a nurse, the source of their information was a nurse, they were not allowed to say RN. They weren't allowed to, based on their editorial style, they weren't allowed to use the designation RN beside the nurse's name. So there could have been more nurses, but they were just sort of quoted as maybe in their administrative position or whatever. But they were not addressed as RN, but they could write underneath and say, oh, this person is a registered nurse at such and such. However, when the doctor, the physician was quoted, they would always, it was mandated that they said Dr. John Doe or John Doe, MD. That was the editorial style. So, in a lot of ways, the nurses may have been speaking out, but not fully credited for their opinions or the work that they were doing, right? And then the second piece being that they don't know how to find nurses. I think that's a nursing related issue where, I'm thinking to myself, well, we need to have some kind of a body. There's a body, I don't know who told me about this, but it's called She Source. Actually, you know what? It was one of the journalists that was on the panel. If you watched the video, when at GW, they had a panel and they had a video where they really like talked about the study findings. And so one of the journalists mentioned that there is a resource called She Source, where they have put together a group of women who are experts in so many different fields. And so if there was ever a time when a story needed to be told, they could pick on one of them. It could be, somebody that is a politician. It could be a cardiologist. It could be anything, police officer, whatever. But it's just a group of women because they're really trying to get women's voices in the media. So they were like, we would welcome nurses to participate in this initiative. And so I think that it would be great if nurses maybe had their own body where we're all nurses there, but then there's a nurse who specializes in dermatology, one who's in pediatrics, one, all kinds of different public health, community health nursing. And then whenever, we would it would specifically be a group who is focused on media engagement. And then if there was ever something where journalists needed somebody to give an expert opinion in a pinch, we would, because they're always on deadline. So we would be readily available. And then the first one was that journalists don't fully understand what nurses do. Can you talk about that? What do you think is the solution to helping the public understand who we are, defining our role as nurses?
Well, I think publishing. So because physicians have continued to publish, right? That's putting them out there as authorities of a topic. And they own that authority, right? They're not shy about it. They're not just saying, oh, it's just my job, right? Which we're very familiar with in nursing. And so the second part of that is like, if we're the largest segment of the healthcare workforce, but people can't find us, that's our fault. If people don't know what we do, that's our fault. And so if we do the writing and tell our own stories, if we do the writing and participate in that research, if we do the writing and report on the results, if we do the writing and report on the strategies, we can own that because we just did it. So now when someone's looking for an expert and they go look up credible evidence, they're going to see nurses all over that. And to me, that is a big part of it. So one of my favorite books is called Key Person of Influence by Daniel Priestley. I read it 2 years ago. It's literally the blueprint I have followed for the last 2 years. I never give recommendations to clinicians unless there's an audio feature or an automation feature. So you can get the audio book. And he has a 5-part framework. One of those is being an author. In the word authority is author. You are the author of that topic. Having a blog, having a podcast, talking about something over and over consistently sets you up to be a subject matter expert. Do you start like an expert on day one? No. But if you keep coming back tomorrow and the next day and the next month and the next year, eventually people are going to say, hey, you're always talking about that one thing. You must know what you're talking about. When you're a clinician or an entrepreneur or a clinician entrepreneur, two things are true. You don't have time. You don't have time and you don't have time. So one thing I learned, you know what it is? So when I started working with diversity in dermatology, I'm the newbie on the team. Everyone else has been practicing derm for a long time, right? So if I'm going to write to this audience, I needed to know something. So it really, I put myself in a room where I'm not the smartest person, right? That's advice we tell everyone. And it forced me to do the reading. And then I saw that I added value to the team who didn't have time to do the reading. I was able to do the reading, summarize it so it's digestible and they can keep doing their thing, whether it's seeing patients or running a business. So it just showed me how valuable and how we can leverage our clinical expertise outside of patient care. So to me, the answer is always going to be writing.
Yeah, I love that. I could listen to you all day. I think if you were my research professor, I'd be like, I want to do that. But you know what? I think that you're so right, is making sure that we are putting our name out there. It may seem like self-aggrandization, but it's really not. It's really establishing ourselves as a profession that's rooted in science, and we have the backing for that. We take courses in research in school. So what happened to it when we leave, right? What do we do with all of that knowledge? This is the point. This is the reason we don't have to do it only when we're getting our PhDs. We can start to do it now. And I really love that, especially when I see nurses working in just very unconventional spaces, right? It really gives me hope that, okay, nurses are really taking charge of their career and their expertise. I love that. The other thing too about defining our profession, I was talking to Kathleen Bartholomew, who is like a pioneer and a leader in the topic of nurses feeding their young. And she said to me, and I'm paraphrasing, that unless nurses define what we do, we're never going to get that much respect, because we know firefighters put out fire. We know servers, they serve food. We know hairdressers, they make hair. Like, it's very specific to what they do. But if you asked 100 nurses, what do nurses do? You would get 80 different responses. And there is no strong, stable definition to what nurses do. And so we should take a stab at it and say, okay, let's give nursing a definition, right? Let's say, what do nurses do? What is a nurse if you were to define a nurse?
I
put you on the spot.
question because I hear what you're saying, but at the other
Yeah,
hand, I was thinking, but do we have to define it? Because definitions technically fit into a box, and that's the one thing we're trying to break is
it can
that
be a
box.
big box though. It can be a big box with lots of
Or no
different.
box, or no box at all.
We are
Nurses,
unboxing ourselves.
well, at the heart of you're asking me about research. Well, our practice is based in evidence-based practice. That is literally the research. That's the foundation of what we do. In the
Mm-hmm,
beginning of nursing, one of your first classes is about the art and science of nursing. Science is
mm-hmm,
research, right? And so what do nurses do? We bring that art, science, and humanity to our interactions with people. Whatever their problem, whatever their situation, we find ways, strategies to implement that are in
mm-hmm,
alignment with them as a person, their values, and their beliefs. And we support them in whatever decision that they choose to make and make sure that their voice is heard, even when they can't speak for themselves. At any setting, at any time along the lifespan,
mm.
nurses are there, and that's what we do. And whatever we're called for, we do that too.
That's wonderful. I love that. I think,
You put me on the
I mean,
spot. That's
I
a
know,
great question.
I know. I'm
That's
sorry.
a great question. No, actually, it's a really great question. And I
It
think
is,
if you go
isn't it?
ask 100 nurses, you should write about all the different 80 answers you get. Wouldn't that be a
Yeah.
wonderful? I would love to read that.
Yeah, nice little booklet about all the things that, because every nurse experiences their role
Yeah,
very differently, right?
yeah.
An
Just
ER
like the
nurse,
patient. Just like the patient.
exactly, exactly. That's right. And somebody, a nurse who has, spent 13 years of their lives or their career in the ER is going to have a very different definition from a nurse who is out in the community, a public health nurse, or a flight nurse. Although I do
Military.
think that a military, although I do think that there is standards, right? So we assess, I like to say we heal and not just treat, because that healing is holistic. We diagnose, as at an advanced level. We assess, we plan, and we partner with our patients, right, to give them the best care possible, optimize their health. And I think our care strategies are wholesome, holistic. We're not just looking at the disease, we're looking at the person. And that's what I think separates nursing from many other disciplines, is that we are very concerned about what's going on here, what's going on mentally, and what's going on physically. So, yeah, nursing
I am
strong.
gonna rebut a little bit on the healing because as a new provider, it became very clear to me that all my education and training was based on the patient centered care,
Mm.
and I was struggling to take care of myself, to make time for my
Mhm.
loved ones, and
Oh,
I said, well,
yeah.
what about me? So now I have this concept of introducing provider centered practice. What does that look like? That means me not believing I'm a healer. How much responsibility and weight is that? I can't own that. That's too much response. I would never sleep if
Mm.
people's healings I was
Depended
responsible
on,
for
yeah.
that. Now, what I do have, what God has granted me, is knowledge and wisdom to act upon,
Mm,
skills to suture, the ability to insert a catheter and connect it to medication that can
mm,
reduce the presence of an infection, to answer
mm,
questions, to hold someone's hand, to put ice where things are
mm,
hot, to cover things that are open. But the healing,
mm.
I'm gonna
Now
relinquish
you
that
leave
one.
that all to God.
But the other
And though
things,
you're, okay, so we are partners in the healing
yeah,
process.
yeah.
Okay.
Because then
I'll
what
rephrase that.
happens when, what happens when my loved one dies and I'm coming
Yeah,
to you? You can't own
yeah,
that unless
yeah,
there was a true mistakes do happen, right? But at the end
yeah,
of the day, life is short.
yeah,
Even with the
absolutely.
best care, the best facilities, the best surgeon, things still happen. And we have to recognize that. And we have to be honest with our patients and their families about that. And they appreciate one thing as nurses, we know people love the truth.
Yes,
They
they
tell us
do.
that. They tell
Yeah,
us that and they
yeah,
mean it.
yeah. That's true. They don't want false reassurance, false
They
hope.
can feel it. They can
Yeah,
sense that.
they can tell.
Yeah. So just be honest and support them through that. Give them that information so they can make a well-informed
Yeah,
decision.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about some other reasons for the lack of representation, right? We know that 90% of nurses are women, and of course, there's that gender disparity where men are more likely to be quoted in media than women are. I've also understood from reading this article that when reporters are calling to hospitals or any healthcare organizations to kind of get some information or healthcare expertise, they are always defaulted to the physician and not the nurse, right? So those are two more things that make for lack of representation of nurses in the media. But what I wanted to kind of focus on strategies for change. That's my big focus is, we've talked about the problem, we have evaluated, we have explored, we've talked about this. We know this article has been out for years. What are some strategies for engaging journalists? What are some things that nurses can do to really start positioning themselves as media experts?
I love this part, right? Because I said our friends they don't have time, right? So what I
Oh,
want my friends to do is I want them to go to ChatGPT, explain their situation, say, hey, give me some strategies. How can I position
mhm,
myself as a media expert? So we're going to give you some ideas, but when the time comes, you can go get your own, right? So when I looked up ChatGPT, it said the first thing we need to do is introduce ourselves as a subject matter expert. I'm Dr. Kimberly Madison, a doctorally prepared nurse practitioner. I specialize in dermatology, nursing education, and research. That's what I do. I own that. And I'm not an expert, but I'm passionate about it and I continue to study every single day. And it said, have that pitch deck ready, right? I think everyone
mhm.
can do that this weekend.
Elevator
You go
pitch.
to,
Yep.
yeah, but also your pitch deck, right? So you're going to go to
Mhm,
Canva, you're going to put in a nice headshot, put some little talking points about you, break up your bio, and so in the podcast world, we have our one sheet, right? It's who are
mhm.
you, what's your mission, what are your favorite talking points, and how to connect with you. That's what you need. So in addition to have something you can share either in person or digitally, yeah, what's that 30-second pitch? It's going to make someone want to sit down and hear more. And the thing is, you
Yeah.
say this every day. You tell your patients this every day. You're pitching every day. Someone doesn't want to take a medication. They don't want to get back in the bed. Your husband doesn't want to go to that doctor's appointment. Your kid doesn't want to eat those vegetables, but you still make it to the end because you came up, you're creative and you
Yeah.
figured out a solution and you owned
Mhm.
that this is, you're going to do this.
Yeah.
In my house,
Absolutely.
this is how it's going down.
Yeah.
On my shift, right? Not
Yeah.
on my shift.
Not on my watch.
We've all said that. I don't care what you
Yeah.
do on the other shift, but while I'm
Mhm.
here, this is
Mhm.
how it's going. Yeah. Because
I,
some people
you
are
know
scared of
what?
chat,
Yeah.
because some people don't know how to use AI. They don't realize it
Mhm.
can be done in their day to day. You don't have to
Mm.
come up, reinvent the wheel. That's what we learn in DMP school. We have these tools to help you, even with a conversation like nurses and media, and you can implement these ideas.
Yeah, wonderful. I think when we do things in our regular life, we don't think that, or we don't understand that those things are skills that carry over into our professional lives. And we do these things every single day. We're teaching our patients, but somehow when journalists are looking for informants expertise, we are afraid. That's one thing that Dr. Diana Mason had highlighted, is that nurses are afraid to talk
Yeah.
to journalists, to talk to the media, because maybe they feel like they don't have the full knowledge. And also, they're not really encouraged and taught how to engage the journalists, right? And journalists are your friends. They're not, they're not monsters. They don't bite. And they are looking for us to give our expertise and our opinions, but we just don't. I think nurses just don't really consider themselves to be, kind of front of camera people. And we want to kind of be in the background. So, time for that to change. So, we're going to play a game so that we can kind of wrap up our episode here, because I have really enjoyed talking to you and I can do this for 2 hours because I think you're such a treat.
Oh,
But I
thank
really,
you. Great
what,
topic. You brought, I think this could be a whole panel at a conference. It was a great topic, especially in
yes,
the age of, social media. This is
yeah,
really a great topic. I really
yeah.
appreciate you bringing it to my attention.
Thank you so much. Yeah, when I love that you're into the research, and so it was just a
You
perfect.
too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
That's the
Okay,
whole
so
point.
let's play our
You think that
game.
motivated you to do your show. That was the motivation of
Exactly,
your show.
exactly. Oh my
You
goodness.
should revisit it. You should revisit it.
Here we
Because
go.
they said one of the limitations is they didn't study online content research.
So yeah, research. Yeah,
That's all you have to do.
she's out here trying to make me into a revisited. Okay.
Yeah, the
Um.
online version.
Okay. Thanks for the motivation. I would certainly, and you will definitely be on that panel and my co-researcher because I could
Yeah,
use some of your.
we'd love to help you do the lit review, right?
Yeah.
That's how we get it
Yeah.
out there. We got to be on a team.
All right. So you ready? Did you think about that script? Are you ready? We're gonna play our
No, I
game.
like things to. No,
No,
I like it to be on the
you're on the
spot.
spot.
I have enough
So
to think about. I don't
I
need
know I
more.
hear you, girl. I understand. I'm gonna shake around our jar here, and I'm gonna pick out a category. Um, and then when I pick it out, you're gonna step into the shoes of a producer and give me the synopsis of a show that you would write that featured the nurse or a nurse lead. Are you ready? Ooh,
Mhm.
okay. This is actually up your alley. It's medical research
Oh,
or
oh, so
nursing
that's
research. That's your
oh,
category.
and what am I supposed to do?
And you're sorry. You're supposed to come up with a show or movie or something that is featuring that is in the media that's featuring a nurse or a nurse lead. So we've talked about the
And
issues that we're facing, representation. We don't like the way nurses are portrayed, and we want to do something different. So I'm giving us the chance to do and create our own something different.
okay, well, I would be remiss if I did went this whole show and didn't thank my team because you did mention the producer and you did say I wear
Yes.
a lot of hats. And one of those hats is as a team member. So shout out
Yeah.
to Alicia and Geraldine who co-host the Melanin Initiative with me. Our producer Angie, she's both the producer and the executive assistant for Mohawk Dermatology, where I have my intern for the year, Jade Trevino. So I stand here as one,
Shout
but
outs. Shout
I
outs.
represent a whole team of people. I never want to sell the idea that being a one woman show is a sustainable idea because it's not.
No.
So, especially for nurses who have
Hmm.
had to do all the things, but we don't want to keep doing all the things.
Oh yeah.
So my idea would probably just be, what do they call it? Like an enactment of my own life, right? And so we have this
Mm.
researcher, they go out there and yeah, they're an entrepreneur research. And they go in with one idea to build a clinic, but start exploring this whole entrepreneur path, getting into social media, and their life just takes off. And so it takes
Yeah.
place in Arizona. And there are like 5 key players in there, and each episode kind of rotates through the different researchers and the information that they uncover. And it's kind of a little bit of a mystery, right? They're trying to find the
Mhm.
answer to an unsolved problem.
I've put you on the
But
spot twice now.
they speak on stage. They have their own podcast. They have all kinds of people come on. And every time someone
Mhm.
comes on, they give a little bit more information to the research. And
Wow.
it's about 8 seasons long. And
Yeah.
every season you get a little bit more of the answer, but the problem also
Mhm.
becomes more complex.
Oh, okay. I love it. A little bit of suspense and a little bit of mystery.
Yeah. But
Thank you.
no
That was
dying. There's no
fun. I
people
love.
dying. I don't like
No
those
people
movies.
dying. Okay. All righty. Some people may be like, no,
And
we
there's a
want
love
God.
story in the background is a love story. So
Oh.
the main character, in the daytime they write articles on research, but at night they write love letters to their love bug.
Okay.
They put that on a
That's
blog.
well done.
It's on a blog, but they're the anonymous. They come with an anonymous name, and
Yeah.
so even though during the day they're doing the research, at night they're doing this blog, and it's becoming wildly popular. And the further their social media presence grows, the closer people get to figuring out their true identity, and so
Wow.
that's where it becomes really interesting.
Okay. Let's give it up. That was wonderful. Oh my goodness. See, I told you you got this. Where can people find you if they wanted to connect with you, patronize you, and just follow you?
The best place to contact me and to follow my journeys on the Mahogany Dermatology blog. And then we have networking groups, as you alluded to. We have the DMV Dermatology MPPA group and our sister group, DermMPs and PAs of Atlanta, where I'm also supported by Caleb in Blacksburg, Virginia, Derek in Richmond, Virginia, and Allie in Atlanta. They're NP and PAs in dermatology. Some of them are brand new into the field. So those are our networking groups for NPs and PAs who practice or aspire to practice in medical, surgical, and cosmetic dermatology. And then, of course, shout out to my affiliations, Diversity in Dermatology, DNPs of Color, the Journal of Dermatology Nurses Association, and the Journal of Clinical and Aesthetic Dermatology. their MPPA perspectives, where I've been honored to sit on their editorial advisory board. I'm a champion for Visual DX and NP Hub. Shout out to Dr. Joseph De Vieira, who has helped our networking group expand to support students looking for preceptors and to make sure NPs are compensated for their time and talent, which they spent money to get.
Awesome. That's wonderful. So yeah, I think we connected on LinkedIn. She's on all the socials, Twitter, LinkedIn, I think Instagram. So definitely follow, and Facebook. You have a Facebook group as well. So everyone,
Yeah,
please
on
follow.
Facebook. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, awesome. Everyone, please
And every
follow
Sunday on
along.
YouTube. Yeah,
Oh
every
yeah,
Sunday on YouTube. Yeah,
you are busy.
it's live. You're going to find it under the live tab. I love to engage with the audience. And it started off
Yeah.
with me sharing my journey, but it's turned into me answering people's questions. And I've found there's so many other people out here like me that want to research, they want to practice derm, they want to learn about the gaps when it comes to dermatology, nursing, education, and research, and skin of color, business acumen, and
Yeah.
digital literacy. That's the gap we're filling. And we can't wait to bring you along and join it, be part of our community.
Thank you so much for being here and stopping by to talk to us. It's Mahogany Dermatology, everyone. Thank you again for tuning in to the Nurse on Purpose podcast. Until next time, take care. Bye-bye. Thanks for hanging with me till the end. I hope you gained some valuable insight into the world of nursing. If today's episode inspired you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who needs to hear about the amazing work nurses are doing. Let's keep breaking stereotypes and reshaping the narrative together. I'll see you next time.